Hi, Steve Gillmor, and this time we're going to do it with sound. This is the Gillmor Gang, and we're joined by, in Half Moon Bay, Robert Scoble.
What's up?
Ooh,
Maybe we ought to reconsider that decision.
Yeah. Take Scoble down from 48 frames to about 5. Chuckling from the British Empire, or what was once the British Empire, is Kevin Marks. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi there. I'm not sure San Jose was ever in the British Empire, but those St. Francis did come very close.
Okay, well, whatever.
St. Francis Drake, you see.
Oh, I see. I thought you were Francis Sinatra. Also joining us from the British, or the late great British Empire, is the on time Just.me world headquarters, Keith Teare. Welcome, Keith.
Well, thank you for having me. And thank God the British Empire no longer exists. I'd have to hide somewhere.
You mean what? To do what?
To deny any responsibility for it.
Okay, excellent. And speaking of denying responsibility, something he does all the time, John Taschek. Welcome, John. Hello. There he is.
Happy New Year.
Yes. So how do you like 2013 so far, John?
What day is it? The 3rd, 4th?
Yeah.
5th?
4th.
So far, so good.
Yeah. Robert Scoble, in our pre-show show, the one without sound, you were talking to us about what?
Going to CES, the big week gadgetry. And Ford gave us a C-Max hybrid because I'm a Toyota Prius owner. And we're going to drive that at least 110 miles an hour. Maybe get 2 or 3 tickets, get arrested. Maybe we'll have to tweet that you have to bail us out. I don't know. We're going to test out a Prius on the way down to Vegas. Anyways, next week, the hot thing is going to be this Leap Motion versus the PrimeSense 3D room sensor. You know, PrimeSense makes this Connect sensor up here, and they all have new, smaller, cheaper ones coming out, and that seems to be the hot thing of next week.
Are these all licensed from Microsoft?
No. PrimeSense is an Israeli company that licensed their technology to Microsoft for the Xbox connector. So PrimeSense is making the Xbox one. Leap Motion has had some really killer demos out there for, I don't know, the last 9 months, and they're finally getting to the point where they can ship. Both of them are I think, going to be under $100. Both of them have very small sensors, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what the differences are between the two and why each company thinks they're superior. But that's clearly going to open up a new age of user interfaces far beyond this early one up here, because this early one can only see basically your outline of your hand, can't see individual fingers, and can't see very much depth. The new PrimeSense and Leap Motion sensors can see a lot more depth when I'm pointing at the screen or trying to draw on it with my fingers or do gestures of some kind.
Keith Teare, what do you think?
You know, I saw this Asus thing yesterday that you put it under your monitor and it picks up your finger and you can draw on screen and you can go like this to flick a page. So it's the problem with it is your arm has to be out here the whole time. So I'm not totally convinced gestures and distant screens go together very well for very much, although I think they do for some things.
The Harley Davidson branded version will be more like this. That's for Rockman USA.
Yeah. And guess what? None of this is going to happen on mobile, right?
Well, not necessarily. The sensors now are getting small enough to stick in a cell phone or a tablet of some kind. And I think that's going to be the behind-the-scenes story, is how small are these, how cheap are they, and can they be built into a cell phone? Because if they can, then you can do all sorts of fun hand gestures, particularly in the car. Already, Waze does.
I do plenty of hand gestures in the car already.
Yeah, but that's
and you receive them too.
Are you a New Yorker?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
do you know the way to Times Square?
That way?
Or should I just go myself?
I don't know. So anyway,
So
yeah,
how are you going to get this
that'll
in a
be the
mobile
question.
thing? Are you is it going to be like a nose cam or something? I mean, how are you going to do this?
I mean, we already have sensors on the tops of our phones, right? So
Yeah.
imagine a future iPhone has a little another sensor here for doing this 3D depth sensing, where you could, poke at the phone, or do a wave, or do a gesture like that, or do something, and it would interact with the phone better. This certainly would be cool in a car, where you want to gesture, show me another map, or, do something with your hands.
Yeah, if you go like this, you can just basically say Robert's a wanker.
Okay. This is one case where video is not additional.
Exactly.
Or it is.
It doesn't need a description.
Maybe it is.
All right, so we're going to see. Yeah, really. So what are we going to see at CES? Is this going to be is this Ballmer speaking, or this the one where he pulled out? Pardon the expression.
Yeah, this show is quickly going somewhere it shouldn't. Microsoft's not there. Qualcomm's CEO is giving the keynote.
Oh, well, fantastic.
Yeah. Well, Qualcomm makes the chips in most of the Android phones. This is actually a real interesting trend that I noticed 2 years ago when they announced Microsoft was going to be kicked out of the keynote spot. The whole show was Android and iOS stuff, Right. And so why is Microsoft giving the keynote when it doesn't? It really is not the key thing on the show floor anymore. It was a decade ago. But today, it's all about Android and wearable computers and these new 3D motion sensors. And the auto industry has a huge amount of stuff there. That's the reason Qualcomm is there giving a keynote is they are in most of the mobile devices. They're going to be in the Google Glasses. They're in most of the Android phones. They have technology that's in the iPhone, right? So why?
But it's boring. But it's boring, Robert. You've got to admit.
Microsoft was boring. Come on, I went to Ballmer and Gates's keynotes for a decade. They were always boring and they never had anything really to say.
Yeah, but look, it's interesting. Did you notice that CTIA merged with its other mobile conference this week? Because when they explain why, it's because the carriers, who've typically been the backbone of those conferences, are now playing a much smaller role in the transformation that we're all seeing on mobile. But we aren't yet at the stage where the software companies are big enough to support those kind of conferences.
Yeah.
So we're in this middle kind of age where what these conferences really should be about is two things: the mobile screen and the TV screen. Those are the two, not the desktop anymore. And there really isn't yet a deep enough software ecosystem to support that. So they're in a bit of a crisis of content, I think, which is why you end up with Qualcomm.
Yeah, Google really should be giving it out. But Google has the Mobile World Congress, which is in a month, and that's where Google really dominates, and that seems like it's the chosen Google show where they have a huge booth. There's a lot of politics going on in these things, but Qualcomm certainly is an interest. I think Qualcomm's a much more interesting player in this than Microsoft is. Qualcomm makes the chips that bring us the cameras, the GPSs that are going to bring wearable computers. So, and they're doing all sorts of augmented reality stuff. And, I think they're far more interesting than Microsoft. Microsoft really is not a player in mobile.
I agree with that. But Apple would be better still. Apple and Google.
On Apple's
Hang on,
never.
Robert. For some reason, you're sort of dropping out. I think it's canceling with when Keith is speaking. So just give Keith a little bit of room to talk. Go ahead.
I could throw a pretty big ball in that mouth right there. So I was saying that.
Why don't we start the show over a third time?
Ideally, if you were running this conference, you would want Apple and Google to be the headliners, maybe Facebook as well. And you would want it to be all about mobile, mostly about mobile. And then you'd want the TV guys to talk about how the living room becomes more connected to those handsets. I noticed Google announced a new thing with the TV manufacturers this week, which is their AirPlay equivalent. So there's a lot going on that is kind of interesting to consumers and is going to change how consumers use stuff. But it feels as if CES doesn't really have the pull yet to get those guys there.
A keynote about AirPlay, about an AirPlay copy would be really, really boring. I mean, AirPlay. I think is the most important technology Apple has right now, and it's great that Google's going to compete with it and get something out. But what do you really say after 5 minutes of showing? Oh, you can put video from your phone to a screen through a $50 device. John
Taschek, what do you think
about AirPlay? Well, I think its time has come. I think it's, you have to build up the experience of the and expectations of a large audience for it to be ready. And I think it's it's around that time. I notice people do want to take what's on their screen and show it. And the smart TVs that are out there are pretty hard to set up. Although once you do it, they're all right. But most people won't do it because, it's like setting the VCR clock. It always blinked 12 for, the 5 years they existed or whatever. So it's got to be really easy. And I think, we're getting to that time where major consumers are going to do that.
What do you think about, the reason that Gates and then Ballmer keynotes at CES were important was because they replaced the similar keynotes at Comdex when Comdex went away. Do you see an enterpriseification, which is, I know, not a word, of CES going on, John?
Yeah, well, Comdex failed for many reasons, but one of them was just management and funding, but also the timing with world events. But CES has picked up that where the Comdex left off. And it actually started happening before then because CES became an important show before then. And it wasn't just about, the people making cases for computers. They got interesting speakers there who were talking about, interesting things that are happening in the consumer world that actually impacted us now. So so I think that, it's definitely cut the enterprise. Mark Benioff's going to keynote there. With around brand, it's totally everything that the former enterprise companies are doing now has or should have a consumer aspect to it. It's not the consumer electronics show anymore. It's the electronics part is gone. It's the consumer show.
To Keith's point, Apple has never, they've always counter-programmed against this with, what was it, the developer show?
Macworld.
Yeah, Macworld. And of course, that kind of went down the tubes with Apple pulling their events back in-house. So there doesn't seem to be something comparable, and I don't think Apple really cares about. They like the window leading up to the holiday season to announce products.
They announced the iPhone right on top of CES, so they forced all the press to come out of Vegas, fly down back up to San Francisco, go to the press conference, and then fly back to CES. And a lot of them were a little bitter about that, but they all did it. And Apple launched the iPhone and completely changed the consumer electronics industry.
That was like 10 years ago, though.
No, 5 or 6, yeah.
6, yeah.
Today, Apple still at its press conferences has more satellite trucks out front than any other company I've been to. So there is still an extraordinary amount of interest in Apple and what it's doing. So Apple doesn't need to do CES. They're one of the few companies in that bucket that can really tell CES to go take a leap. Google probably is in that bucket. Microsoft thinks it's in that bucket, but I think Microsoft is going to be drawn back to the show because
they kicked that bucket.
Well, they tried, but I think that really is going to hurt Microsoft a lot because this was the show where Microsoft was dominant at and had a huge booth right at the front of the major hall and had lots of signage everywhere. It'll be really interesting to see just how absent Microsoft is. Does Microsoft come here and do a guerrilla marketing thing and still try to get some Windows 8 banners up and fly a plane around or something. I don't know. It'll be fun.
It's Microsoft's in that place where no matter what they say or come out with, even if it's good, there's going to be it's so galvanized. There's going to be half the community hating it. So that why risk the bad press? They're not in a position to take that risk right now. They've got to build up some.
I disagree. When you were at CES last year, the Microsoft booth was mobbed, was wall-to-wall people. There's a lot of interest in Microsoft and what it's doing. I think right now, Windows 8 is going to be a very interesting story. When I walk the show floor, I'm going to be looking, what do I see about Windows 8 there, and what do the consumer electronics dealers, like if I walk around with Best Buy again, what's their approach to Windows 8?
You can still do that.
Yeah,
but you can do that now. You can do that at this time.
But Microsoft,
it will be interesting. Absolutely.
I think Microsoft is missing a big opportunity to talk to the industry, at the show. But
Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But whatever Microsoft says that comes out of there is going to be. It's going to be met with half the world is going to hate what they say, and the other half is going to love it.
This hybrid, software for touch and software for desktop. It hasn't worked out too well. They're going to make somewhat of an effort to get devices out there, but they really know that they've got to go to whatever the next generation is to be in play. And I thought when Sinofsky went, that was a symbol of that recognition to some extent.
Well, Sinofsky went because he was an asshole. Let's just be honest. That's what I've heard that, and I've met up with that. I heard that from now insiders that have started talking about what really went on. And same thing with the guy at Apple who got fired.
Scott
Forstall. Same answer. This guy was a jerk. Forstall, I think, was fired for a little bit more symbolic because he had no ideas. And Google.
Well, he has a mapping problem, right?
That's just a small little fraction of what is going on. What is hurting Apple? Yeah. Apple really is positioned against Google very, very poorly right now, and he got fired because he didn't have an answer to that. That's really we're moving into a world of prediction of context, and Apple is not there. I
don't think that's the big problem.
That's ludicrous.
I don't think it's all about context. Apple doesn't feel any pain from the absence of context yet.
It will.
Siri may be
but they'll get
one place where they do.
I'm using Siri more and more for everything, and because I'm using it, what it does is it bypasses the screen that I have to authenticate into the iPhone. It lets you in for one thing, which is what you're trying to do, and then locks you out for everything else that you want to do, which is a pain in the ass. But Siri is the doorway. Combination of Siri with the Apple Maps is stunning because you're transported to a different world. It's not about looking at lists of turns. It's about you say I want to go here. It finds it for you, and then Siri starts talking to you and tells you, take a right.
Except the Google voice system works better than Siri does, and the Google Maps work better than the Apple Maps do, and the Google knows more about who you are.
Yeah, but that's the whole point is, Robert, that if you're in the Apple ecosystem, which I am, once it works for me. It's a system service. I'm going to use that. And the more I use it, eventually they'll start to mine that. I mean, right now, for example, if you misspell a word consistently, that service which changes the word for you on the fly, that can be a real pain in the ass sometimes.
Yeah.
It doesn't learn, or it doesn't appear to learn. I think it's learning on updates to the system, globally, not on any specific individual basis. But once they start to turn on the processing of the data that we're giving it it's going to be indistinguishable from what Google is going to provide. So it's
You really think so?
yeah, I do.
I don't.
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
Too.
and here's why. Google knows a lot about me because of my Gmail. Apple does not have access to that. It knows a lot about me because of my calendar. Apple does not have access to that. It knows a lot about me because I use Google Maps and I don't use Apple's Maps because they are horridly inaccurate in my experience. They sent my wife on an hour-long journey somewhere that she wasn't trying to get to. And they just don't have the context data that Google does, and they don't have the developers. The developers are building apps. I saw 2 yesterday again that are coming out on Android first because they can talk to the dialer, they can talk to the calendar, they can talk to other things on the phone, they can talk to the Wi-Fi radios that they can't do on iOS.
John,
and we're
what do you-
seeing apps come out on Android first, and this is why Apple is fired Forstall.
Okay,
He doesn't
Senator
have an
Scoble,
answer.
will you yield the floor?
Yeah.
Thank you. John, what do you think the percentage is between Apple developers, iOS developers, and Android developers right now? In terms of, if you have a choice between developing for one or the other platform, what do you think that the percentages are, just roughly?
In the U.S.?
Yeah.
It's probably a little bit skewed toward Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 60-40, I don't know.
Yeah,
and
that's what I would
worldwide, it's
think.
probably 50-50.
Right. So to your point about developers, I disagree completely. It's
I'm
it's
saying
not
for
that they don't have the
contextual
developers.
apps. I'm saying for
Well,
certain kinds of
it's
contextual
a bigger
apps.
point. It's a
go
bigger
ahead,
point
Keith.
than just developers. It's also money. I mean, developers that develop primarily on Android do get access to things they do not get access to on iOS. However, they don't get revenue on anything like the same scale you can drive through the iOS ecosystem.
That's
so
changing.
developers
Everything's changing. It's all
not
flattening,
yet,
going
well,
to
slowly,
two
but
places.
really, I
You know,
don't
it's
think
gonna go to
changing
Apple and it's gonna go to
enough.
Google.
I deal with this question every day, and I can tell you it is not that attractive to be Android only, and it's still pretty attractive to be iOS only.
Okay, so as John Taschek just said, it's basically dividing up into into the two markets, notably excluding Microsoft.
Yeah, that I would totally agree with.
Okay,
The
so
world is
all I'm
still-
saying is that when you say that Google has context, they certainly have a lead in it, but I don't think that the lead. I mean, I think that the reason that they dropped Maps and started, trying to build up their own system was because they were almost too late to do it. But they aren't too late, and they are proceeding rather dramatically. And Siri, I mean, I know that that Google has had with Android, it's had an audio Siri-like function well before Siri was in place. But if you're on the iPad, and particularly the iPad Mini, Siri. I mean, my daughter, we got her an iPad Mini for Christmas, and the other day, I asked her something, and she used Siri to find out the answer.
Yep.
I mean, these.
I like Siri too, and believe me, I have $10,000 worth of Apple products staring at me right now. So don't mistake that I love Apple, but I am seeing a chink in the armor of Apple, and if they don't fix it, it could become an arm that's missing from Apple or a leg that's missing from Apple rather than just a flesh wound.
Right.
And
I don't think Apple's going to fix that in any short-term time frame, because they are thinking of the consumer as a consumer, not as a target. They don't have it in their DNA to want to target a person. What they want to do is they want to supply something you want to use and love using. And advertising just isn't part of the real mix of what they take into account when they're building. And arguably, that is a lot better approach for the average mobile consumer who probably doesn't want to be targeted that much. I think you're exceptional in this regard, Robert, that you genuinely believe that you're going to get better ads that you want to see through better targeting in the future.
And Apple
I
don't
says,
see
look,
it just
we're
as
just not in that
advertising, by the
market.
way.
We want you to have a great phone that has great texting, great email, great camera, great video, great games. They're in a different world. They're not an advertiser like Google is.
I think you nailed the Achilles heel of Google's Android. Although for the reason Google is selling 6 Android devices for every one iOS is a few reasons. One, price, but two, the carriers can do things on Android that they can't do on iOS. For instance, yesterday a company showed me a new kind of ad targeting that AT&T is shipping on its phones that goes on the bottom, and it lets you pull up your Facebook, but it also lets you click a button and get offers from around you. And this is a way that these carriers are monetizing on Android, and they can't get to do that on iOS. And so when you go into an AT&T store, are they more likely to shove an iPhone in your face or shove an Android phone in your face and say, man, this is cool, you know?
I mean, all that's certainly true, and the Android platform is incredible. But the reality is, and will probably continue to be, as far as I'm concerned, that the amount of dollars that flow through iOS are going to substantially perform in the marketplace, and Google is going to continue to trail.
Well, Apple certainly. At my New Year's party, Steve, you were there, right? Was there a single?
Do you remember it? I was there, but I wasn't drinking. So
that's why I'm asking you. You know. And did you see an Android phone at that table? And there was lots of social media influencers at that table. Almost everybody had an iPhone that I remember. So, you know,
there were 3 at my table, but we were in the next room. So.
Yeah, that's true. We did relegate the Android user to another room.
Well, we put up a video on AirPlay, but you didn't see it.
Oh man. Anyways, there was very few of the influencers are on Android, and I can see this when I speak at conferences. The question is, do they start switching? And I'm starting to see a few switch. Scott Jarvie, a famous photographer, was here, and he shot this picture last night on his Android phone, right? A Samsung Note. And when we get these wearable computers, I'm going to feel impelled to buy an Android phone because they're going to work better with Android than they will with iOS. And how many other people who are influencers, heavy adopters, heavy users, highly monetizable people will switch off of Apple? I think that's where I say there's a chink in the armor. Can Android, get in that chink and really do some damage? I don't know.
The thing is, what Google can't do is compete with Apple as a kind of a fashion accessory. It just isn't as cool a product for somebody who wants
I'm not
to
so
look
sure
cool.
that's true anymore.
And that's why I think the influencers have it. It isn't, of course, the hardware, the beauty, the design. The software stack is better. The way it binds into the different stuff is better.
That's changing, by the way. There was just a great blog post yesterday, and I forget who wrote it, where he explained, he showed all the customizations that he was able to do, and he was able to make his phone far more beautiful than my iPhone is. The advantage iPhone has isn't the beauty or the customization, it's the consistency, so that I know when my dad has a question, I know where everything is because he doesn't have the ability to move everything around. And it's the same as on my phone.
I mean, that continues to be the chink in Google's armor and Android's armor is the fragmentation problem. They just don't have the. And Kevin, you feel free now to argue with me.
Well, I think they don't have a fragmentation problem. They have a ubiquity problem. They are the default phone, and they aren't necessarily the first choice for everyone, but they are the phone that most people end up with. And the challenge they've got with that is getting people to take the effort to customize it and mess around with all these features rather than just using the basic bits and pieces of it. That's a tricky challenge for them because certainly the iOS has shown that people has attracted the people who are more likely to fiddle around with it.
Right. Well, I don't disagree with your assessment about ubiquity, but I disagree with what you have to say about fragmentation. We see the marketplace is littered by the also-rans, and particularly Microsoft, who have for years tried to force feed their hardware partners to get some consistency across the platform, which is all it's done for them is to slow down their efforts. I mean, I remember all the PDAs that were coming from the Windows, technology, and they were the best in the marketplace, but they were all too late, and there were 5 of them, and so there was no consistency across those different devices, and so they all ended up in the drawer of the trade media, right, John?
Yeah, I had a few of those. Samsung was one of those first Windows PDA cell phone combination pioneers, with a little stylus on the what's it called, the i730, I think.
And
that might be a car. I think it was i700 series, and they were all right. I mean, they were really bulky and heavy, and they didn't give a good experience. But as far as Google and Apple go, I think you're going to see Google is going to be able to catch up on design at least as fast as Apple catches up on the software engineering part of the Google stack that makes Android appealing to people who use a lot of Google stuff, Gmail, Docs, and things like that.
So I'm not sure what you're saying. Are you saying?
I'm saying that
Google's gonna,
Apple is known as the beauty and the design, but Google can catch up on that. They can actually buy a design company or several. They can catch up on design easily, and Android has some capabilities in the engineering side and the software side and that tie into the enterprise that Apple will also have to catch up on. It's kind of a race. One's going toward one model, one's going at the other. In the end, the consumer wins. They get the choice.
Absolutely. The thing that is becoming much more valuable than design, because I agree with you. I think that the new I saw a bunch of Samsung phones over the holidays, and I kept saying, well, what's that? Because they look fantastic. They were a little big in the sense that they basically were great right up until you have an iPad Mini, at which point you don't care. But the well, it's true. But the thing
they're sort of halfway between these two, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing about that I think is a much more valuable advantage that iOS has, and to some extent Amazon has. I got an email from Amazon saying that Jimmy Page, there was an authorized conversation biography of Jimmy Page, and it took me 2 clicks to have it starting to stream down to my machine, because it was on Amazon. It was on Kindle Library. They've got my credit card, so it was click, and then go on to the rest of it. I still haven't even looked at it, but the economic power of that model is extraordinary, and I don't think Google is anywhere close to having that fixed.
I think that's true, just completely. I mean, I was reading an article on the iPad the other yesterday about some guy who'd switched from iPhone to Android and gave a list of apps. And I thought, that's an interesting app. And I clicked it on the iPhone and installed the app on my Android, because you can do that with the Google App Store. So there are bits of this stuff that work better for Google, whereas for iOS you can only install it on the thing you're running, and then you've got to go and fiddle around to get it onto the other one later. So there's a difference between the two there that actually works in Android's favor. And yeah, the thing that's getting interesting is that because the resolution of phones is growing so fast, you don't necessarily need to go to the bigger device to see the video or anything anymore, and that starts getting interesting.
Yeah, in fact, I don't even like the big devices. The ones that don't quite fit in your hand, I don't like. I either want an iPad Mini or I want something that fits in my hand but has a high resolution. And by the way, on the fragmentation issue, it was announced yesterday that 40% now of Android phones in use are ICS or above, which is a pretty decent milestone. It doesn't compare with Apple's adoption rate, which is now in the 80% range, but it's a lot better than it used to be.
But that also means, given that Android is got a larger market share, that volume is catching up with the consistent version of iOS as well. Yeah.
And Google is fixing its problems. It'll be interesting to see what happens at the Google I/O conference this year. Last year they clearly made some strides on UI and smoothness. They call it the Buttery team, and that team came from Apple, by the way, through the hands of Tom. And Google will improve its side of the fence. Apple is unknown what it's going to do to really get us to dream again. What? Okay, we all want a Retina iPad Mini, but that hardly makes us dream and say, "Oh, Apple is going to change our world again," the way the iPhone did, the way the first iPad did.
So people are saying they're going to introduce a watch, and then they're trying to attack the TV content market, failing so far.
Well,
but it feels like wearable
watches are good for retirement
gifts to an iPhone combined with content availability are probably the two big plays they're doing.
Steve asked why do we need a watch? Well, there's lots of people walking around with these Nike Fuel Bands or Fitbits or other things. People do like wearable devices. The Pebble watch raised more money on Kickstarter than any other device. And by the way, next week they're announcing their device and they're having a press conference at CES. I'm going to try to sneak off to that. A watch makes sense in a range of things that you would wear and hook into your phone.
But Robert, as to your comment about what are we going to dream about, I noticed Mike Harrington. You remember him, Mike Harrington?
Yeah. I liked his post, by the way, this week.
Which one? I like the one about what he really cares about, which is money. That was a great post.
That was a great post, but I liked him calling all these tech journalists saying they're bored.
Yeah, but okay, good. That's what I wanted to get to, because my advice has always been that when we start to think that there's nothing going on, that there's a lot going on. So
yeah, look at all the PrimeSense monitors and the Leap Motion. That alone. Just those two companies alone are making the industry interesting right now. People who say the industry isn't interesting are nuts. By the way, even if you buy into the fact that all these smart people are doing advertising targeting and stuff, a company was here yesterday showing me some cool stuff, and they were really, really bright. They had PhDs, but it's not just about advertising. It's going to be about everything. And look at Facebook. It's
so. John, do you think that there's going to be something to dream about, or do you find fault with the whole concept that we need to that we live for change?
No, there's always going to be something to dream about. I think it comes in kind of waves, though, and. There's the kind of the leader mentality where they, this is the coolest thing, and then after that everybody follows this pattern, and then at that point, it's not an inflection point. It's like a negative inflection point, a disinflection point. Everything becomes boring,
and we kind of
are hitting that. But in the meantime, this whole new trough of, we're emerging from this trough of other things. It's just going to be, really fascinating things. Robert's on to wearable, the glasses. Google's doing a lot in artificial intelligence. Apple with TV, they're reinventing that. Something of those things, something's going to emerge. It's really going to be fascinating, and we don't know what that is yet. But a combination of something wearable with something like that. What was this prime suspect thing that you're talking about, Robert? What those things that Kinect uses?
Which, by the way, PrimeSense is a small piece of a bigger trend, which is the number of sensors on us or around us is going up exponentially. And the PrimeSense is just a cool sensor that lets you see three dimensions.
So I think that they're going to embed all these things right in your phone. They're going to have, instead of one little camera and one little microphone, you're going to have a variety of sensor arrays that are in this device. It's not coming out this year, but
that'll be a
coming out.
2014, 2015 trend. They still need to miniaturize that sensor more, but we're clearly going to start seeing some of the signals of where that industry is moving at CES next week. That'll be, a lot of stuff that you see behind closed doors is sort of a signal of what's going to come in a year or 2 years. Even like last year, we saw the OLED TVs. Does anybody on the show have an OLED TV? No, they're too expensive. But in 2 years, I bet a lot of us have OLED TVs because the costs will start coming down.
Well, didn't LG just announce a fairly inexpensive 60-inch OLED TV?
Fairly inexpensive being $10,000.
So that's what the plasma TVs cost when they first came out for a 40-inch.
Absolutely true, but this is a signal of price slope comes down, adoption goes up. And so we're looking, for OLED, we're looking at 2 years from now.
And who knows what's going to be in those TVs. They could have the sensors built in.
We're getting signals of all sorts of stuff that the costs are just about to start coming down radically and shrink in size. And that means the numbers of them are going up exponentially and will change the world in lots of different ways in a year, 2 years.
There's something fundamentally wrong about making TV part of the furniture, though. And, because, we've designed living rooms around the TV and making media rooms. There's something wrong with that. So something has to change there. It could be something that you just flash on your wall or something, but and it's super bright and OLED powered.
This is where a lot of futurists go nuts. When I worked at Microsoft, they had this home of the future, right? Which was basically take everything in your house and make it the most expensive thing you could imagine doing. Like they had a doorbell, which was a pocket PC, right? You're never going to spend even $50 on a doorbell because
every 12 hours your house went blue.
That's one problem. But even if it didn't do that, you're not going to spend more than $4 on a doorbell because nobody uses it. I've used a doorbell once in the past 2 months, So the chances that you're going to take your family budget and spend any amount of money of that, any percentage of that on a doorbell is just totally nuts. Now, where do we spend our time? It's in front of the TV. It's our entertainment. That's where we spend our time. So that's where the family will centralize its expenditure. Well, it'll spend as much money as it can on the TV. And
hang on a second. I think on the last show I predicted that there were going to be, or maybe it was around the fire at Half Moon Bay, the idea that, if you've got glasses that can be transparent or they can be shades if you don't want to be recognized, but they have, basically full 3D imagery.
Yeah.
Who needs a wall? Why should that be on the wall?
Because the wall is always going to be better, and most people don't want to. Yes, because the wall is social. The glass is TV.
If we're all looking at the same thing, does it matter?
Yeah, but syncing things up is really difficult. Come on, man. Google can't even sync my contacts with my Apple phone devices right now, and you're telling me that you're going to sync 4K.
Here's what I am telling you.
Coming into my glasses, that my batteries are going to be okay on that. Give me a break.
Here's what I'm telling you.
I like the future too, but it's too far off.
My 12-year-old has an iPad Mini, as I suggested to you. By the third day that she had it, she was crouched on her bed, wasn't moving. She had her TV on, but with the sound off. She never looked at the TV. The computer, the Mac Mini, it was on. There's stuff on the screen for playing. What's that game, Mac? Drivel or whatever it's called.
I don't know if my kids play it.
The point is that she just took everything and moved it into this. Now that she's sort of OD'd on it a little bit, she's going to back off. But the reality is that what we're looking for is contextual availability. That's what people are going to do. I don't need to, if I don't have to turn around and flip on a screen and sign into a device in order to be able to see something. If I'm in this room, I can look at that device. If I'm in the other room, I look at another device.
I get it. Except two things. Take the young kids. My kids always argue over the TV, even though they both have their own iPads. They still want control of the shared social experience, which is
why AirPlay is the shared experience. It's not the screen.
They haven't figured out, and they like, by the way, a different thing on TV than they're watching on their iPad. They'll watch Thomas the Tank Engine on their iPad, and they want Umizoomi on the TV. And they argue with me when I say, you already have one of your screens going. I want the screen to watch news. And they're like, no, Daddy, no, we want Umizoomi. And they'll yell and scream. Go ahead, Keith.
Robert, what you're really saying is, I don't know if you'll agree with this, but I think what you're saying is that the living room is still ideal for passive entertainment unless there's only one person in it. But the minute there's two or more people, you cannot have interactive big screen unless one person has control.
Right. Now,
or you're playing a video game, but yeah.
Video game. There's a social thing. I mean, Scott Jarvie stayed here last night. He's a famous photographer. And what did we do? We put on a movie. And because it was social, we were all looking at our screens. My two kids had their iPads. Scott had his, I think, a Sony Vaio or something like that. And I had my iPad mini going. We are all multitasking while consuming this content. But the second point about entertainment is because I can afford to, I'm going, my home entertainment system is always going to be better than anything wearable for a few reasons. Number one, speaker drivers, when they're this big and moving like this, shake the house. I'm sorry, I have $900 headphones on right now. These are Ultimate Ear headphones. They don't shake the house. As well engineered as they are and as good as they are, they don't shake the house. And second, I like having a big cinema experience, and most people do. Most people want a bigger screen in their house than they already have, and that's going to be a constant pressure to get bigger, to be more like a movie theater. You can only do that with a big piece of glass in your house. You cannot do that with wearable
or a projector.
Projector is crazy because it never is going to be as sharp as that OLED. When you see these OLED screens and you realize how much resolution they're able to kick out and how many lumens they're able to kick out and what kind of contrast they're able to kick out and how bright the room can be compared to with a projector, you're never going to like a projected system as much as you're going to like an OLED screen. And so for the next 5 years, we are not going to get rid of TV. Now, 10, 20 years, maybe, I don't know. But even then, I bet the Chinese and Japanese and the Taiwanese and other people come up with better ways to build screens that are sharper and brighter than what we have.
John Taschek, your eyebrow speaks volumes. What were you thinking when you went like that?
I'm not sure what I was thinking, but I just said, I think this started off maybe with me saying there's something fundamentally wrong about designing a room around a TV, and something has to change there. I don't know what it would be. But yeah, there's movie theaters are projected, of course, and Peter Jackson did The Hobbit at 48 frames a second, and he's changing, what is happening in theater.
But movie theaters turn off the lights. Movie theaters turn off the lights, and they have a special screen up front that is highly reflective. That's not my wall.
Why not?
Yeah. So when
you have to build a house. If you build a house around a projector, you can build a great projector. But the projector does not compete with the OLED screen for most people in most people's living situations.
Sure. I agree. I just said there's something fundamentally wrong about building your room around it, something that's for passive entertainment. There's something has to be more.
Yeah,
that was my point.
That's the point.
And I'll stick with that.
Yeah.
But I think
it's a little bit like building a room around the fireplace. You wouldn't do that anymore.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I think the thing that joins these things back together again is the gesture stuff. Because once these things have a sense of where you are in the room and where other people are in the room, you can activate different screens depending on what people are trying to do. So I'm not sure we'll end up with one giant screen, but more and more little screens lying around. Like we have that now, except we're carrying one in our pocket and one that's slightly bigger that sits on the couch, and then there's one on the wall. And that as the the price point of those goes down, it's going to be more like the what do they call it, the oblong thing, where there's a bunch of screens around. You say, just put that on that one and that on that one, because the cost of the screen is going to be low enough for you to use them. This the thing of the Bill Gates house that is sort of coming true was all the pictures are actually screens, and we're starting to hang more and more smaller and flatter screens all over the place and use them. Like you say, you're saying your daughter has 4 screens going at once, and just because they happen to be there and she's not really paying attention to them, they're wallpaper until one of them becomes interesting. I suspect that will start making more sense when these screens actually have a sense of where they are, where you are, and you can say, that thing, put it there, rather than fiddling around with AirPlay for a couple of minutes and fighting over who has what.
I think that's maybe too futuristic. I think people do want to watch TV. They like live sports. They like to have a movie. They want to have some context around it. So maybe they augment the TV with some information that's supplied around it. Like if American Idol pops up, you have a bio that comes up on your screen, and that makes it somewhat interactive. And then you can collaborate around that. I think that's the next step. I think that's only one step in this progression for the battle for the living room. I just don't think it's been thought through all the time, through what can happen in the living room. I also think that density issues in almost every first world country are going to come an issue, so that you can't build a room around a TV. So there's going to be a few houses that have TVs, and then you have to figure out what to do with the rest.
I don't know. I have a very small room here, and look at all the glass I have in front of me, and I love it. And by the way, everybody who comes over here drools. Scott Jarvis like, oh, I wish I had a man cave like this. I wish I had a big screen and 3.
Yeah, but he doesn't. He's a famous photographer, right? So there's an issue. There's going to be a certain number of people who have it, and then you have to figure out what to do with everyone else. And that's where the consumer device manufacturers tend to go. They tend to figure out how to solve that problem. I just don't think they've thought it out yet. I think people just continue to go on the TV path. But I still think it's fundamentally wrong to design a room around glass.
I think that some of the thinking that Apple is doing, and I'm sure others, but particularly Apple is doing around Apple TV is instructive to this point, which is the value for Apple as a business is not from passive entertainment. It may have been how they built iTunes. It may have been how they took down the record business. It may have been how they did not take down the film business. All those things have been true, but I think we're starting to see different behavior, which is doesn't honor big screen entertainment in a social environment as much as shifting to the battle for the second screen in a situation. If you've got, first of all, if you've got a projection screen in the near future and you have to turn the lights down, that's probably fine, because most people, if they want to interact with it, they're going to pick up their iPad Mini or their whatever that other one is that Google has, and they're going to interact with it. It doesn't really disturb anybody else. It's just it's a small amount of light that's being projected for these small devices.
I agree with that. I think John nailed it. Human beings like to be entertained, and it's enjoyable to be passive. And the interaction is not going to happen on the shared big screen. It's mainly going to happen, as you say, Steve, on the lap-held second screen. And there's a bunch of APIs coming out now that specifically give that possibility of synchronizing data on one screen with an image on another screen. And that certainly will, from a sociological point of view, that fits what the living room is a lot better.
Yeah,
I think the issue of whether it's projection or TV is probably taste-driven and space-driven. I prefer projection. I project onto my whole wall in my living room, and it's like being in the movie theater because it just uses the wall, and it's not even a special screen. It's just a white wall, and it's actually really, really good.
Tina asks,
it's good if you don't have windows. Yeah.
Tina asks an interesting question, which is, is the TV becoming more less of a passive device and more of an interactive one? And if so, how? Does anybody think that that's true?
It's the cloud. The cloud gives you the interaction. It's like choosing what comes on the screen. Apple TV is great because you can buy stuff, or favorite stuff, or put stuff on a wish list. What comes on your big screen is then very much to do with you, rather than being pushed at you or broadcast at you. So the interaction happens off the screen, but reflects itself on the screen. But it isn't like multiple, except for video games, of course. It isn't multiple people using the same screen for different purposes in the room at the same time. Not that kind of interaction. So it's two screens in the cloud, which is probably a great title for today's show. It's the screen you hold in your hand, the screen on the wall, and then the cloud is the personalization back end.
It's a good title, but it won't get on Media Redefined because there are 20 posts that are titled that.
Have you guys seen
screens in the cloud using? I thought it was an innovation to say two.
I thought it's three. Have you seen Berg's lamp project? Berg Design in London. They came up with this interesting idea of using basically like using projectors to highlight things in the real world. So they had a computer-controlled angle-poised lamp that had a projector on it and a camera, so it could look at the stuff on your table and say, that thing there is the thing you're looking for, and light stuff up and put dots around things, stuff like that. I think that idea of, if you want sort of some way out there stuff about how you might use projectors in the house, I recommend looking at that project. That's really interesting.
Robert, you want to describe what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm using the Apple Remote app on my iPhone to control my Apple TV's interface so I can watch different TV shows and get around the UI, which is, by the way, a huge advance because all the other devices I have, my kids lose the remotes, which usually looks something like this, And I can never find these stupid remotes, but I always have my iPhone because if I left my iPhone anywhere, I'd be dead. So...
All right, so let's go around the table and wrap this one up, starting with John Taschek.
Well, we started with CES, and we kind of ended with a CES-like thing. And we started with CES 2013, and I think we went on to discuss what's going to be at CES 2015. It's very interesting. There's these consumer devices, they're very related, which is why we could have the same discussion around them. Is what's happening in mobile and what's happening in entertainment. I mean, the combination of the two is very powerful. And with mobile, there's two big companies battling it out from two different sides, and entertainment is it's going through kind of a. Although it's like the greatest year in Hollywood ever or something like that. But $10 billion or something. So it's a big business there too. But they're all working together, right? So you combine your mobile device, which is used for business, which is used for your phone calls, your personal life, and also entertainment. You get a lot of things. And I guess that makes the what's going to be exciting. It's happening in the background. We're not necessarily aware of it together, but that's the thing that's going to come out this year, I bet.
Keith Teare.
I think as we discussed that, there's also is the consumer something to target, and is context and targeting the essence, or is the consumer somebody to delight? And I think philosophically, Google takes the targeting approach and Apple takes the delight approach, and I think Apple's approach probably is going to win.
Win what? There's only two winners here, and everybody else is a loser.
Something they want to embrace as opposed to something they reject because they don't want to be targeted.
I say that the opposite is true. I think that Apple has focused on building lovely physical objects with software to augment the physical objects, but they've missed the boat on connecting that across the network to everything else, whereas Google is really good at making sense of information in the world, information about you, giving that back to you, to the point where the advertising will become a hidden substrate in that. Once you've started using the sort of the Google Now experience, that is something that you really like. Huh?
Yep, and I would go with that. People who key in on advertising are going to miss the boat here. It is going to be targeted of everything, better experience in life. better movie tickets, better better movies, better restaurants, better friends, and you're going to be targeted when your friend is nearby and available. I got a message the other day that MG Siegler was nearby, and I messaged him on Highlight and said, "Are you really in my neighborhood?" "Yeah, I'm sitting at the bar." Now I wasn't available, so I couldn't go meet him, but that could have led into an interesting conversation that I wouldn't have had without this kind of technology, right?
Yeah, but
and
that's not targeting. That's not.
That is targeting. That is how this stuff is going to work. It is highly targeted to you, making predictive and interactive systems based on your context.
No, I call that intimacy. I think there's a big difference between desired intimacy and pushed targeting.
And it's all going to be
That's British intimacy, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it was a British bar.
He's just happy to see
you. Here in Half Moon Bay, there's a great British bar. You should come over, Keith, and we would have some of this intimacy together.
Over at Newcastle Brown.
So I think we're going to call this show two clouds in the screen. Okay, or maybe three, but I think it's definitely two right now.
Keith, this intimacy and this targeting are going to be mixed together.
I'm sure you can see this, but this is nearby events that I just got from Google now. I pulled up at the bottom, clicked on that, and this is like interesting stuff that's going on near me. But three of these were like, oh, I didn't know that was going on. That's interesting. So they're clearly doing some kind of correlation with realizing I like to see live theater and stuff.
And wait until they really go into your Gmail and understand who you are.
Oh, yeah,
and Google has that advantage. And wait until they go into your calendar and know, for instance, next week I'm in Las Vegas. So they could already be setting me up for things in Vegas and putting that on Google Now and saying, hey, on Tuesday afternoon you have an hour for free. Do you want to set up a dinner in that hour or something like that? And this stuff is already happening. I've already seen it. It's coming this year in a big way. And it's coming first on Android because they have better ways to hook into Gmail, into the contacts, into the phone dialer, into the Wi-Fi radios, and get more of this out and build apps faster and better that are richer, that are way beyond even what Google Now is showing us. And by the way, just wait until we get this wearable computer. Then the demand for this stuff will really take off.
So I'd love a longer conversation with you about how targeting and intimacy blend together and what's different about them, because I think they are different, and I agree with you there's going to be an effort to blend them together.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's one thing. I think there's at least two things, and maybe more than two things going on there.
I think that the differences between the two leaders are overstated. Are overstated. I don't think that there's. I think that they both come from their own strengths, and they're moving toward the other's strengths and away from their weakness.
The way I look at it is, I look at who knows stuff about me. Apple certainly does. They have my phone, and they have my credit card and phone number, and they have a lot of my behavior on apps and carrying my phone around and calling people. They know a lot about me. Google clearly does, because I use Gmail to talk to the world. I mean, what's my most popular screen? It's Gmail. And they know my calendar, and they know where I am. They know a lot more about where I am in the context of location. Who else knows something about me? Amazon knows what I buy and what my wife buys. Facebook knows all my friends and all my social behaviors and my news reading behaviors. Flipboard knows something about me. But after you name 5 or 6 companies, it gets really tough to know, to describe a company that knows something about you that they could use to either target you or cause this intimacy, or do a Google Now kind of thing. After those big companies, Amazon, Google, Apple, and Facebook, there's not a whole lot of companies that know a lot about me. And those other companies, other than those big 4, are going to find themselves really struggling to compete in this new world. And by the way, the things that are going to delight users are going to be this intimacy and this targeting. Targeting, if it's done right, is really cool and really.
Yeah, but if it's done wrong, it's the opposite of intimacy.
Absolutely. But who is going to do it right? It's going to be one of these 4 companies, because you have have to know something about the user to do any good targeting with no noise.
But
High
mostly
signal-
today it's being done wrong. Most of what's being done today is wrong. Like if,
I totally agree with you there.
yeah.
Well, as now a veteran of Facebook, after actually 2 days of actually being on it, I have to say that it's only because the iOS experience. Yeah, I went on it because to understand their sharing model. Excuse me, lack of sharing model.
Because of what picture?
It was a Beatles picture.
Well, that and the New Year's Eve party where we were all trying to poke you, but
Luckily, I'm too old. You know, when you're talking before about, seeing the difference between the fingers, I can't see them right here. All right, listen. So far, I think that Facebook and Apple and Twitter and Google basically own the world.
not Amazon.
I think Amazon's great, but they're getting squeezed from both directions. I think there was an article by Dan Lyons that I noticed while I was trying to catch up before the show, where he basically said, he quotes some analyst piece and basically says that Windows 8 has been a complete bust, and that Microsoft is screwed. I don't know how many times we're going to have to hear this before we realize that we're seeing something profound in terms of Microsoft's inability to be able to pull out of its situation. And I look forward to the comments from the Microsoft lovers.
But I was just looking at all these photos on my Apple TV, which got there automatically from my iPhone. And Apple knows where I've been because each one of these photos has a location underneath it. And so it knows.
Isn't that how Zuckerberg got in trouble?
No,
Zuckerberg,
Randy Zuckerberg.
No, Randy got in trouble for a different reason.
It was a geotagging of a photo.
No. Randy's problem over Christmas, she shared a photo of her family, of Mark and a few other people, and she shared it privately with her friends.
Oh, sorry, I'm confusing the two stories. It was McAfee who allowed a photo to be published that was geotagged with his location.
That's how he got caught. OJ got caught because he turned on his cell phone and didn't realize that once you turn on a cell phone, the cops can go to AT&T or Verizon and say, where is this person? And they have to tell them. And they know within 150 meters, if I remember the right. But
back then. It's much more accurate now.
Probably more accurate now. And
3
certainly,
feet.
I don't know if it's that close, but it's close enough that a cop can figure out where you are. And anyways. So Zuckerberg's problem was a different one. She got in trouble because somebody didn't understand the privacy contract of Facebook.
Gee, I wonder why.
Because it's not very clear, one. Two, our social norms around sharing of data are changing, and there's going to be friction. Wait until I walk up to you with
Wait
Google.
until they start, making services available for your Gmail for all the, inappropriate email that you've been sending to somebody you're having an affair with. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah. Anyways, wait until I walk up to you with the Google glasses on and start recording you. Then we're going to have another discussion about, what is privacy and what am I allowed to do? What are you allowed to do? And all that.
Well, that gets into the most interesting area looking forward, which is, people live their life, they share some of their life, and they look back on their life. And the tools we have to do all three today can all be better.
Absolutely.
But they're pretty amazing already.
Yeah.
And a lot of our discretionary and, lack of tax rebate money is being spent on this.
There's
Okay.
Scott Jarvie shooting pictures last night in Half Moon Bay.
Yeah, that sunset picture was gorgeous.
Yeah, that was amazing. Can you send it?
I already did.
The full resolution
Can
version.
you share that with only your friends?
I don't-
Only your close friends with push notification enabled?
I took this image off of Facebook, off of Scott Jarvie's Facebook, and it's pretty high resolution. I don't know why you need more resolution, because unless you have a 65-inch monitor,
I will. I'm going to have this OLED screen soon, and I'll need more resolution.
you won't need to worry about that for at least
Yeah.
a little while. But
Or you
this
could
one-
just get a marijuana card and everything will look bigger.
Yeah, right.
Well, we're talking sunset photos. We might as well show
Okay.
that one. Yeah.
I want to thank Rackspace, and particularly Rob Legess, without which this show would not be in big screens and little ones. I want to thank NewTek and their TriCaster, an early dream technology. Thanks. Okay, I want to thank Robert Scoble and his finger.
Poking you, you know.
I want to thank John Taschek and his reappearance from God knows where. It's good to have you back.
Good to be back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I want to thank Kevin Marks. Thanks for showing up eventually.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Always pain. And Keith Teare, as always, fantastic. Thank you. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. And I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those in the chat room. Bye-bye.
Bye.